Now, just hours after I make the episode, talking about, the medium ships, the big boy, the one that we've been waiting for gets announced. But we're not going to start off with the Corsair just yet. We're going to talk about another ship that is in this group going into production. A ship that is long overdue in the eyes of many, but may actually benefit from this long wait. And so the people who own it are probably going to get so much more than they would have gotten had the ship been built years earlier. And we're of course talking about the Banu Merchantman. Now, many of you may know or may remember that years and years ago, I made a video that was, perhaps a little bit aggressive, but this was talking about the fact that specific to the Banu Merchantman, a long time ago, CIG used to do these live broadcasts where they would interact with the audience, right? On Twitch, and it was Reverse the Verse. And I think before that it was even maybe called something else. I can't remember, but it kind of filled, the Wingman's Hangar slot as that show disappeared. And, people from all over the production staff in LA would come and hang out and answer some questions. There were some funny moments. There were some unintentionally funny moments. Probably some moments that we shouldn't revisit, but consistently during those early days, there were questions, when is my ship going to get made? When's my ship going to get made? When's my ship going to get made? We would pester CIG with these questions. And, you can argue fairly evenly that, it's a worthwhile question to ask. You've spent the money. So when do you feel that you're going to get my ship? And CIG, on one particular occasion, handled the question very, very poorly. Very, very poorly. And they had said that, it's done when it's done, and it was like an eye roll and a snicker and, whenever we get around to it type answer. And I was very alarmed by that response. The response was, it was because, in my mind, it's like, for CIG, it's like you eat at the table that we provide. Could you at least be honest about the situation of the Banu Merchantman? And here is probably how I would have answered the question at the time. And this is probably what I would have said. And this is basically what is going to be true of the Banu Merchantman. I would have said, look, the Banu Merchantman is a very special ship. The Banu Merchantman is a very unique ship in the Star Citizen universe. There's going to be many cargo haulers in Star Citizen, but how many of those are going to be alien ships? So this has to be something that just doesn't look like a human ship with a paint job. It has to be alien and yet approachable. It's going to be very difficult to do this. And also, there's a lot of ships that we're building along the way where we're learning how to do things. And we're learning what works and what doesn't. So you may not see the Banu Merchantman for a while. It's not to say that it's not a priority for us or that we don't respect the ship or respect the money that people put into the ship. That is to say that when you get this ship is going to profit from all the lessons we've learned on all the previous ships. And when we do this ship, we want to make sure that it's perfect. We want to make sure that it's as close to perfect as we can get it. And I know it's not the answer that you want to hear, but that is what we're pledging to you, is that when we get around to doing this ship, it is going to benefit from every ship that had come before it. So in a way, technically, it's not that we're not working on the Banu Merchantman, it's we're working towards the point where we feel we can do the Banu Merchantman. The Banu Merchantman really is going to benefit from all the ships that had come along previous to this. One of the funny things is that you can't get to the point of making a Banu Merchantman and making a Banu Merchantman truly a good ship if you haven't had a Starfarer, right? And, the Starfarer is, unequivocally a failure. And even CIG has admitted that, Even the artist who created it has publicly admitted, like, that was a disaster. That was a bad ship design. And chances are, probably in the future at some point, when CIG has the time and the resource is free, they may go back and revisit the Banu Merchantman and say, yeah, I don't know what we were thinking. We built an FPS level. We didn't build a ship. And this has been a frequent criticism from the player base, myself included, in that CIG isn't really building ship interiors with the idea of ship interiors being ship interiors. They're thinking about them from, I want to make sure that there's interesting FPS angles, instead of saying, you know what, I want to build a ship that's just a really good ship, and the FPS stuff is just going to be incidental, right? And that is kind of an issue, but we've learned a lot of lessons over the years with a lot of ships. There have been a lot of struggles, and there's been a lot of back and forth between developers and the players or backers, because there are some backers who just kind of show up, back a ship, and then just say, let me know when it's done. But a lot of that feedback kind of leads to the next generation and the next generation of ships being even better and even better. And that was one of the things that I had said, relative to one of the episodes, dealing with the Corsair, was that it's almost kind of a shame that it was so late in the game's development, after so many years, that it seemed that we started to finally get ships like the Star Runner, like the Corsair, like the Apollo, things like that, where it was just like, these are the ships that learned the lessons of all those kind of first gen ships that are, like when we were talking about the Constellation, and some people were like, it's not that bad. It's just like, it's pretty bad, dude. It's pretty freaking bad. I mean, you stick a Constellation next to a Corsair. If you could just swap in the Corsair for the Constellation with the Corsair's firepower, and imagine doing those PvE missions. Yeah, let's be real. And so the Banu Merchantman is probably going to end up being one of the most sought after ships in the ship lineup, especially if you're hauling cargo. I mean, there are other potential applications to the Banu Merchantman, and we'll start talking about the Banu Merchantman a lot more. I mean, there's even a pirate application for the Banu Merchantman, something that needs to be thought of. I mean, this is definitely a ship that could step in and fill in that role that, to a certain degree, sadly, the Caterpillar has somewhat vacated. The Caterpillar at one point was the cornerstone of a pirate raid, and now it's just kind of like, well, it's a run-of-the-mill low-end hauler. And I don't mean low-end like, just terrible, but low-end in terms of, firepower and all that, because I think that there are obviously better options in terms of hauling and in terms of, combat capability out there, and you're looking at one of them, right? So does that mean that you should ultimately just kind of jump ship and, if you have a Caterpillar, you should jump ship and just step up to the merch? And this is the difficult part. This is the difficult thing to say, is that it's one thing to appear on the roadmap. It's another thing to appear in the hangar. I don't want to say that, especially to the Banu Merchantman owners, but it's just like, it's true, right? We know that it's true. CIG has expressed the intent of making this ship before. Some people may not remember that shortly after I made that first video a long time ago, I think it was back in 2015. In 2016, Ben Lesnick and Sandy Gardner were talking about ships, and they had expressed the intent to go ahead and produce the Caterpillar, the Xi'an Scout, and I believe they also said the Banu Merchantman in 2016. Like, that was, at one point the plan or the intent, but plans change. And unfortunately, the Banu Merchantman has, kind of been existing in limbo for a long, long time. And it seems that hopefully, finally, we will start to see some work done on the Banu Merchantman and start to see more of its interaction with the Banu Defender, which I'm sure a lot of people are dying to know what that's going to be. But, when I start seeing production images showing up in episodes of Inside Star Citizen of, here is our next take on the Banu Merchantman, here is, our concept art so far, here is where we're at, here's the white box, here's the gray box. When I start seeing that stuff, then I'm going to be like, dude, it's almost a lock. Almost. Next up, the Vulture. What do I think of this? Now, in the past, CIG has talked about Salvage, kind of like Tier 0 Salvage, which was always going to be the hand tool. And, kind of melting away chunks of a hull, and then you could use that in the future to patch up the hull of your own ship, that sort of thing. I kind of feel like Tier 0, before anyone gets too excited about Salvage, Tier 0 implementation for something like the Vulture is probably going to result in something not unlike mining in the current game in more ways than one. How, like, let's say you're mining asteroids in space, right? You're a miner, you're out mining asteroids in space, you go out to dust clouds or whatever. There's fixed asteroids out there, you mine them, all that stuff goes into your mole, goes into your prospector, then you drop it off to be refined, and then you then sell those minerals off, or I believe you can still sell them on site if you just choose to take the quick money. Though, once again, I would totally, show deference to an actual miner, because, you can see in the top right of my screen, the level 5 crime stat flashing. I don't mind. Like, I don't have time for that. I've goofed around with it a couple of times, but it's, I am not by any stretch of the imagination a hardcore miner in this game, nor do I intend to be. And I have a feeling that Salvage is going to be very similar to that. In its first implementations, there's probably, you go to weapon testing sites over Hurston, you see chunks of ships or stations or whatnot kind of floating around. Chances are probably Tier 0 implementation is going to be you operating some kind of a tractor beam, bringing items in between those two arms at the front, and they're probably going to go and get wider, or you'll be able to move them a little bit, and you'll just kind of bring things in, and then those little beams in the middle will slowly kind of dissolve up the pieces, and then you kind of scoop them up in, and then you go to a station and maybe you refine that scrap metal into its various components, and then you can sell off those components. So it's probably going to function in its initial state very much like mining. In the future, of course, they're probably going to let you go out there with a cutting tool, and if there's viable weapons still on the ship, you're going to be able to cut them off. But that's probably all going to need to benefit a little bit from this new scanning tech that they were briefly showing off, I believe, on Thursday, and stuff like that. For the Tier 0 implementation, you're probably going to just be mining the remains of hulls that CIG has put into space, because the dynamically created stuff like the wrecks that we create when we're going out and we're blowing ships up, that stuff can't really permanently exist in Star Citizen right now. It has a very short lifespan, because I just don't think the servers can support that many consistent or persistent wrecks existing in the universe. It's probably just a little too much, and so CIG is probably going to be a little bit more conservative until they get server performance and a lot of this, the supporting kind of framework that's going to make that work into place. That would be my expectation. I don't think that this is going to automatically extend onto the Reclaimer. The they'll probably get Salvage working for the Vulture right away. They'll probably do something for the Reclaimer a little later on. But I would expect that if you own a Vulture, if you have a Vulture, good for you. It's a Drake ship, fine ship manufacturer. Chances are this is probably going to be something that in terms of profitability is akin to flying around in a Prospector, which I understand is actually quite good right now. So, I mean, good for you, man. Your ship is being built. I love it. I absolutely love it. Now, I've seen some of the speculation out there. Oh my God, by the end of 2021, we're going to have the Corsair. I would say conservatively, no. Early 2022 would be the more likely date, because what I saw on the roadmap was just the art team being assigned. And I kind of went to the deliverables and I looked at that, and I didn't really see anything beyond that would make me think, oh, okay, yeah, no, they're going to close this out real quick. There's still tech teams and people that need to step in and connect the piping and all the various nonsense that makes a ship work. So early 2022, I would say probably by the end of March, beginning of April, air quotes, patch, that is likely when we will see it. So not 315, not 316, 317, maybe. I would say that would probably be the more solid bet. And I do think that CIG is going to go the distance on the ship. For the many reasons that we've discussed in the past. They already have most of the assets together. They know the Drake look. They know the Drake ships. They're perfectly fine at building them. And, the fact that the Polaris and other things have been kind of pushed aside to make room for this is probably more indicative of, the time it's going to take to finish Squadron 42. Rather than, we just don't need these ships. There's multiple factors that we've discussed with the Polaris that could lead to it being bumped. But I do think that in the end, they are going to go the distance on the Corsair, and the Corsair is going to be built. Now, I had made some comments in recent videos in regards to the Constellation, or I think in the last video more than anything else. And I want people to kind of understand the type of ship that we're talking about here, right? The type of ship that we're discussing, because you kind of put these two ships in the same group together. Obviously, one gun-wise is a little bit more ferocious than the other in terms of guns under the pilot's control. The other one carries more missiles. One is probably going to be faster. You're looking at it right now. One of them is probably going to be slower and more tanky. And that is going to suit certain player styles. Now, there is some inconsistencies and there are some issues with the Constellation, some of which have been resolved, some of which haven't. But project into the future when the Constellation is more or less dialed in and we can realistically look at that ship and say, yeah, you know what, there are some internal flaws here, but the ship performs as arguably it should perform, or as we idealize it to perform. Would you consider that ship or this ship here, the Corsair, to be a soloable platform? Now, what I mean by arguably soloable is that, let's say you own a Corsair, or if you are a current owner of a Constellation. Opinions differ from time to time. Opinions differ on these things, but if you've flown the Constellation, certainly as a solo pilot, imagine if you could assign NPCs to your turrets. Imagine if you could assign an NPC to your snub fighter, and you could command them and they would do what you wanted to do, either defend the ship or shoot my target, yada, 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 right? Arguably, that's still something that you can manage as a solo pilot. Now, when you step up into things like the Carrack and bigger, that's where you kind of get into that area that we're kind of getting away from a solo ship, and we're getting into much more complicated machines that you could probably still manage to control with NPCs or with, server blades or whatnot. But I think that you would be a little bit behind the eight ball at that point. I think that those ships get to a certain level of complexity where it would be beneficial to have more than one player there. And I think that ships like the Corsair, ships like the Constellation represent that dividing line in my mind. You know, you might feel differently, but to me, that's arguably where the dividing line is. Ships like this are, you know, when people start to think about the Star Citizen universe, you know, they generally, they think of it in very small ways. You know, like we've talked about and we've memed on the fact that everyone thought that Arena Commander was the end all and be all of space combat, until someone woke up one day and realized that no, Star Citizen's actually a lot bigger than this little bubble, and what's true in the bubble is not true in Star Citizen. And people started to go like, oh, wait, I can do better than this. You know, this is not what I should be using as my, you know, my metric to judge the game or to judge a ship. And in the same way, because we're trapped within the confines of the Stanton system, we are trapped in just a slightly bigger bubble. Because remember, it's not going to be just Stanton. If you're looking at this roadmap and you're going like, hey man, check it out, you know, the Corsair's there, but look elsewhere in that roadmap and you'll see Pyro. You'll see talk about Odin, you know, you'll see talk about other systems that they are starting work on. And so we are going to get to a point where, you know, we're seeing Stanton evolve. We've been watching Stanton evolve very, very slowly, arguably since 2.0, which would be our first version of Stanton, really. We've been watching Stanton evolve very, very slowly. But I would guess that chances are we're going to get Pyro, and then we're going to get another system almost immediately after that. We know that they have another studio now working on these star systems. And as each one of these things expand, players are going to start to confront the realities of the personal inventory system. They're going to start to really confront the limitations of what they can bring with them, because all these systems are going to be coming online around the same time. Players are going to have to start thinking beyond Stanton. You know, right now, Stanton doesn't matter. I keep all my stuff at Grimhex. I keep all my stuff at Area 18. Doesn't matter. It doesn't really impact you in your day-to-day playing of the game. But you're going to have to start to move into a situation where, you know, we had our little event here in Stanton with, you know, the Xeno threat, that whole business. And that was a cool little event. Everyone, or a lot of people, chose to participate in it, have a little fun, make some credits, see what it was like. CIG got to test a whole bunch of things, but those types of events are going to be permanent things in Star Citizen. They're going to be happening all over the place. And you're going to want to participate in those events in an ever-expanding galaxy as more and more star systems are brought online. And, you know, chances are you probably still have, you know, that's so true in a lot of MMO communities, is there still is a lot of single-player mindedness out there. So when you decide, hey, I want to go to that distant solar system, what am I going to need to bring with me? Well, I might need cold weather gear. I might need a land vehicle. I mean, you can get into a point just in Stanton where arguably now having a land vehicle that's environmentally sealed, like an Ursa rover, unfortunately being, you know, our smallest and, you know, a very problematic option, let's just say, because the Ursa rover does have some serious issues. But, you know, an Ursa rover, and, you know, park your ship 50 kilometers away and then come in solo and, you know, do your mission, then get away in the Ursa rover, take the weapons, take the goods with you, go back to your ship, that sort of thing. This is going to become more frequent, more, you know, complicated missions and things like that. And you're going to need a ship that can do that for you. And you're going to need a ship that you can arguably do that by yourself, because, you know, when we're talking about single player in a multiplayer game, we have to come to grips with, there's a certain amount of people who say that, oh, that mentality is just passé, and that's just people who don't understand that this is a multiplayer game. But that element is certainly there to an extent, but I think that a larger portion of that is also that even though it's a multiplayer game, when I log on, or when you log on, or when anybody logs on, there may be nobody else on at that time. You know, if I all of a sudden have a bout of insomnia, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I log into Star Citizen, I'm not going to get onto Discord and just start pinging everybody I know on Discord saying, come play Star Citizen with me. I don't care if you're sleeping. Ping, 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 ping. That's not going to work. You're going to need a facility that allows you to play the game by yourself. You're going to need a facility that allows you to travel around the universe by yourself. And let's say, hey, everybody's over here in the Lear system or the Pyro system. Grab your gear, come join us. We're doing these missions. You're going to need something that can get you there with all your gear in a reasonable amount of time. And at the end of the day, these being the largest of the soloable ships, I think is what is going to drive their popularity. They may not be the best ships in the game for any one duty, but they're good enough. In the same way that the Cutlass Black was not the most powerful, not the most maneuverable, not the fastest fighter, but it became so popular because it was so good at so many things while not being excellent at any of them. That's what drove its popularity, and that's what's going to make these ships popular. The Connie has a ways to go. I think we can all agree that the Connie still has a ways to go. The Corsair is probably going to benefit from a lot of the lessons learned on the Connie. When we were talking about the Banu Merchantman earlier, the Corsair is definitely going to benefit from a lot of those hard lessons learned. And so, the Corsair is obviously going to come out a lot stronger. There are going to be some issues. There's probably going to be some tussles with CIG over this, that, and the other thing. But ultimately, you have to understand that this, as the game evolves and as the game gets bigger, this is where more and more players are going to go. I'm just telling you this ahead of time. All these people who are kind of sitting there and going like, oh, I got to get this fighter for this situation and that fighter for that situation. And, I want to have this one in case I want to do a little stealth op or something like that. A lot of these people, when it comes down to reality, are going to let all those ships collect dust, or they're going to cash all those ships in at a later date and just dump all their money into something like this. And they'll, grab a couple of NPC packages or hire NPCs in game to man the turrets on their ship. And that's how they're going to play Star Citizen for the majority of the time that they're playing alone. And hey, if my friends happen to show up, I can leave my NPCs at home and bring them along. They can man the turrets, man the Jeep. We're good. When you start to think about the realistic logistical concerns that you're going to be dealing with in the future, these ships become even more logical, right? It becomes a foregone conclusion. You just gotta take those few steps away from dealing with your immediate concerns and dealing with the concerns in the future. I mean, I know what it's like to sit there and go like, oh man, but what's the hot fighter? Maybe I got to get that, maybe I should get that hot fighter. Maybe I should get that saber, Invictus is coming up. Maybe it's time to get that saber. But think about the future, and what you're going to need, because I think it's, for most people, even if they don't want to admit it, deep down, it's fairly evident that a lot of these ships that CIG has invested so much money in developing, I'm talking about fighters specifically, a lot of these ships are going to end up quaint anachronisms, forgotten in long since abandoned hangars, sad reminders of what people thought Star Citizen was going to be when they didn't understand what CIG was building, and arguably CIG didn't understand what they were building, right? This is going to be, as we kind of move forward with Star Citizen's development, ships like this, ships like the Mercury Star Runner, ships like the Constellation are going to become the standard ships that people are going to fly. And you're going to start to see in the community a lot of people, as Star Citizen gets bigger, as we start adding new star systems, a lot of people in the community are going to be kind of late to the party, and they're going to start melting their way out of their fighters that they've been collecting over the years and turning them into these bigger ships. As these new systems come online, as you can put NPCs in those turrets, as you can modify more of those systems, as their various careers become much more pronounced, the Star Runner gets data running, we've seen some of the beginning of the scanning systems that obviously an exploration vessel like the Corsair will take advantage of. As we start to see more and more of these things come online, people are going to start to push towards these ships, and you're going to see a bigger outcry in the community for more of these types of ships. That's probably when you're actually going to see the 400i for real, is when CIG internally kind of confronts the fact that the most important segment of ships in Star Citizen has yet to really been touched on.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.